Hello students. Today, we are going to dive deep into a poem by William Shakespeare called, "That Time of Year Thou Mayst in Me Behold," which is also known as Sonnet 73. This is one of Shakespeare's most famous sonnets. A sonnet is a type of poem that has 14 lines, and it usually follows a specific rhyme scheme. Sonnet 73 is a part of Shakespeare's collection of 154 sonnets. This sonnet explores themes like aging, mortality, and the passing of time. Do not worry if these words sound new or complicated. By the end of this video, you will understand every line, every word, and every idea in the sonnet, "That time of year thou mayst in me behold." Let us begin. First, let us talk about the title. The first line of the sonnet, "That time of year thou mayst in me behold," sets the tone for the entire poem. The poet is addressing someone, possibly a close friend or a loved one, and asking them to observe or notice something about him. The word "thou" was commonly used in Shakespeare's time and means a you. The phrase, "mayst in me behold," means, might see in me. So, in simple words, the poet is saying, you might see a certain time of year in me. Now, let us go through the poem line by line, word by word. We will explain every part in detail. That time of year thou mayst in me behold. The poet compares himself to a specific time of year. When we think about a year, it is divided into 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, or fall, and winter. Each season has its own characteristics. Spring represents youth and new beginnings, summer represents maturity and growth, autumn represents aging, and winter represents the end of life. Here, the poet is asking the listener to imagine that he is like a particular season. As we read further, we will understand which season he is talking about. When yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang. The poet gives us a clue about the season he is referring to. He describes leaves that are yellow, or that have already fallen, or that are very few in number. These are characteristics of autumn. In autumn, the green leaves of summer start to change color, turn yellow, and eventually fall from the trees. The poet is comparing his current stage of life to this time of year. He is suggesting that he is no longer young and full of energy like in spring or summer. Instead, he is in the later stages of his life, just like trees in autumn that are losing their leaves. Upon those boughs which shake against the cold. The word "boughs" refers to the branches of a tree. The poet describes how the branches shake or tremble in the cold air. This image emphasizes the idea of autumn, when the weather becomes colder and the trees are bare. Symbolically, the poet is talking about his body and how it has become weaker with age. The cold represents the difficulties or challenges that come with getting older. Bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. The poet uses a beautiful metaphor. He compares the bare branches of trees to ruined choirs. In the past, choirs, or groups of singers, would perform in churches or other places. These choirs were lively and filled with the sounds of music. Now, the branches are bare, and the birds that once sang on them are gone. This symbolizes how the poet's youth, energy, and vitality have faded. The sweet birds represent the joy and liveliness of earlier years, which are no longer present. In me thou sayest the twilight of such day. The poet moves from the metaphor of seasons to the metaphor of a single day. He asks the listener to imagine that he is like the twilight of a day. Twilight is the time of day when the sun sets and darkness begins to fall. It is the end of the day, just as autumn is the end of the year. The poet is saying that he is in the twilight of his life, meaning he is in the later stages and closer to the end of his journey. As after sunset fadeth in the west. This line continues the idea of twilight. The poet describes how, after the sun sets, the light gradually fades in the western sky. This fading light symbolizes the gradual decline of life. The west is often associated with endings because the sun sets in the west. The poet is emphasizing how his energy and vitality are fading, just like the light after sunset, which by and by black night doth take away. The phrase by and by means as soon, or gradually. The poet is saying that after twilight, darkness, or black night, eventually takes over. In this metaphor, night represents death. The poet is acknowledging that the end of his life is inevitable, just as night inevitably follows the day. Death's second self, that seals up all in rest. In this line, the poet describes night as death's second self. This means that night is like a second version or reflection of death. Just as night brings rest and stillness, death also brings an eternal rest. The phrase, seals up all in rest, suggests a sense of finality, as if everything is being closed off and put to rest permanently. The poet is drawing a connection between the natural cycle of day and night and the human cycle of life and death. In me thou sayest the glowing of such fire. The poet introduces a new metaphor. He compares himself to the glowing of such fire. Imagine a fire that has been burning for a long time. By this point, it is no longer a strong, bright flame. Instead, it is glowing faintly as it burns out. The poet is asking the listener to see him as this fire that is nearing its end. This metaphor continues the theme of aging and the passage of time. That on the ashes of his youth doth lie. The poet describes how the faint fire is lying on the ashes of its earlier flames. The word ashes refers to what is left after something has burned. Here, it symbolizes the remains of the poet's youth. His earlier years were full of energy and passion, like a strong, bright fire. Now, only the ashes of those years remain. This line emphasizes how the poet's youthful energy has faded with time. As the deathbed whereon it must expire. The poet compares the ashes to a deathbed. A deathbed is the place where someone passes away. By saying that the fire is lying on its own ashes as if on a deathbed, the poet is reinforcing the idea that his life is approaching its end. The fire, like the poet's life, is about to expire, or come to an end. Consumed with that which it was nourished by. This line is very powerful and thought-provoking. The poet explains that the fire is being consumed, or destroyed, by the same thing that once gave it life. Fire is nourished by fuel, like wood or coal. But as the fire burns, it consumes this fuel, and eventually, the fuel runs out, causing the fire to die. In the same way, the poet's life is being consumed by time. Time gave him life, but it is also the force that is bringing him closer to death. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong. In this line, the poet addresses the listener directly, meaning the listener understands that the poet is in the later stages of his life. The poet believes that this realization will make the listener's love for him stronger. Knowing that time is limited can make us value and cherish the people we love even more. To love that well which thou must leave ere long. The poet concludes the sonnet with a powerful message. He says that the listener should love that well, meaning love deeply and fully, because eventually, they will have to leave the poet. This is a reminder that life is temporary and that we should appreciate and love the people around us while we still have time. Key themes and ideas. Now that we have gone through the poem, That Time of Year Thou Mayst in Me Behold, line by line, let us summarize the main themes and ideas. One of the central themes of Sonnet 73 is the passage of time. The poet uses 3 different metaphors, autumn, twilight, and a dying fire, to illustrate how time moves forward and how life eventually comes to an end. Another important theme is mortality. It is the idea that all living things must die. The poet reflects on his own aging and mortality, but he does so in a way that encourages the listener to appreciate love and life even more. Finally, the poem explores the theme of love. The poet suggests that understanding the temporary nature of life can make love deeper and more meaningful. The structure and rhyme scheme. Sonnet 73 follows the structure of a Shakespearean sonnet. It has 14 lines, divided into 3 quatrains, 4-line sections, and a final rhyming couplet, 2-line section. The rhyme scheme is A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, G G. This means that the first and third lines of each quatrain rhyme with each other, as do the second and fourth lines. The final couplet has 2 lines that rhyme with each other. This structured form gives the poem a sense of balance and harmony. The tone and mood. The tone of the poem is reflective and melancholic. The poet is looking back on his life and thinking about how time has changed him. At the same time, the poem has an underlying sense of hope and love. The poet encourages the listener to cherish love and make the most of their time together. The mood of the poem is thoughtful and emotional, inviting the reader to reflect on their own life and relationships. Conclusion. In conclusion, Sonnet 73 is a beautiful and deeply moving poem about aging, mortality, and love. Through vivid imagery and powerful metaphors, Shakespeare captures the universal experience of growing older and facing the end of life. At the same time, he reminds us of the importance of love and the need to cherish the time we have with our loved ones. By understanding the poem, That Time of Year Thou Mayst in Me Behold, you can gain a deeper appreciation of Shakespeare's brilliance and the timeless themes he explores. I hope this explanation has made everything clear for you. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your exams.